Mormonism in America is just, I find it as a historian fascinating and just kind of observer of American culture, because most people know what they know about Mormonism are, I've kind of found three things. Well, four. One, you're a member of the church, right? Obviously, there you go. Two is South Park, and the South Park episodes on Mormonism. Three is a book that came out in the early 2000s. I'm looking in my office right now to see if I can find it, to hold it up, and I can't. My bookshelves aren't fully installed yet. But the third is this book called Under the Banner of Heaven, that is one of the most manipulative. I mean, it's beautifully written, but it's one of the most manipulative books you'll ever read, because what he does, John Krakauer is the author, the guy who did Into Thin Air and Into the Wild, all these other kind of outdoor nature books, is he weaves together the history of Mormonism, which he does really well. It's an accurate kind of basic description of the history of Mormonism, but then he weaves it together with the story of these serial killer brothers who just also happen to grow up in Utah and be grow up in the church and grew up kind of in fundamentalist Mormonism. And by doing this, and again, it just kind of shows you that the power of like excellent writing, and he is an excellent writer, is that he gets you to the point where it's just like, and religion is violence, you know, and like that's not true, but you know, he doesn't say that. He just kind of gets you to the edge of the cliff and then just says you can jump if you want to. And so that's the second one. And the third one is the TV show Sister Wives. And then, you know, you get into that. And so of the actual church and of actual Mormonism, there's very little scholarship done. I mean, scholars have studied it, but within kind of mainstream American culture, I think it's really misunderstood and treated poorly. And I didn't grow up in the church. I've never been a Mormon, but I've actually been confused as a member of the church by multiple people as I've talked about this, just because, and this is a part of the study of Mormonism, is they've just been so mocked and mistreated throughout their history that if you kind of take them seriously and just kind of like give them their voice for what they kind of believe and kind of give them an honest fair shake, there's just kind of this automatic assumption that you're a member of the church, you're defending the church, and I'm not. So yeah, so there's fascinations with this a lot. I found it interesting, and the thing I love about studying it professionally is I'm a historian of religion. That's what I got my PhD in, American religious history, and what I love about the Mormon church is that as a historian, as you're kind of tracing and following this change over time, different religious groups shift in different ways. And so I have a chapter that I've written for my book, and this is kind of a part of my bigger book project, over Notre Dame and the shifts within Catholicism. And the Catholic Church, in a real way, is one of the largest and oldest bureaucracies in the world. And I mean, it is global, and the hierarchy and structure, and because of that, it just moves really slow. And as a historian, and as you're following that change over time, you're just like, and they met for 10, 12 years, and then Vatican II happened, right? And so it's just, there's not these, you know, quick moments. And so, you know, I describe following the Catholic Church as kind of like following a tortoise around, and that it does move, but it moves really, it's just like this real methodical pace. For the Mormon church, and it comes from their theology, their structure, and their history, is just like following a rabbit. And that, you know, we're going this way until the prophet has a revelation, and we do a complete 180 and go the other. And so as a historian, that's just a lot of fun to see, is this, you know, large religious group with, at the time, thousands and thousands, not like a million of followers that kind of, as church leadership, have this, I'm mixing my metaphors here, but like exit from the highway from the far left lane, and they just like jerk the wheel. And like that makes sense for them theologically, but then like the people on the ground are left to sort that out with their lives. And there's no real how-to for that. And so when I was looking for groups and people to study, I knew I wanted to do something on Mormonism, and in this biggest kind of moment of cultural shift right after 1890 within Mormonism, just is the exact same time as college football is really coming up in America and American culture. And so those two things just, I think, went together perfectly.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That's like super fascinating because like I grew up Catholic, and so like growing up, my dad's always like Notre Dame, and I was like, I don't understand, but it's fine. So I kind of like that because I see that so much because I had one of my best friends growing up was Mormon, and so just like that difference in like the culture of the two churches is fascinating. I was wondering if you'd be able to just kind of give us a brief introduction of your chapter, because when they kind of piece together some of the responses that you have, I just want to make sure that everyone really fully understands like what you encompassed in that chapter, since it was such a great chapter, and they'll kind of go to the museum as like a precursor to being able to read the book. So I feel like that'll be like really fun for them.
Yeah, so the chapter investigates college football at BYU as this site of religious shift within Mormonism. And in 1890, after the 1890 manifesto, the Mormon church began its cultural shift into the mainstream. It was really a turning point for the church from going to from embracing this outsider, an intentionally outsider perspective and relationship to America and to American culture, to one of trying to become the American faith and truly American faith. And so to kind of investigate that in a new way, looking at BYU football as a site for that, as a place where you have this intersection of religion, the fact that it is associated officially with the LDS Church, but also as a place of shaping young minds in the next generation of Mormonism. And so as you have football rising on college campuses at this time, Mormonism, trying to rise within American culture, looking at the debates on college campus at BYU that reach into the church to see how they wrestled with the meaning of the game, the violence of football, its place on campus, and what does it mean to be a Mormon man? As the 1890 manifesto really reshaped those definitions. And so college football at BYU provided a great kind of case study for all of those wrestlings, really from a grassroots perspective. And that's something that I think is important about my chapter, is that we're getting voices from people that are on the ground trying to work this out, not just coming from a pulpit, not just coming from church leadership, but really these college students trying to figure out what faith and life really mean.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm trying to keep this like natural, but also like make sure we get some like key
Yeah,
things.
no, it's great.
So if you have anything extra like that you want to add or different things like that, you can at any time. I think I'm trying to look at the questions that I sent. I guess, did you, because I know Dr. Anderson briefly mentioned that like this was like a small part of like your dissertation, like you were talking about having like the religious like doctorate and everything like that. Was there any like extra information or maybe side stories that you had found when you were doing the research for this chapter, for the chapter as well as the dissertation, that maybe you didn't put in the chapter, but you still think are like really interesting little side stories?
Yeah, there are a lot. I think the thing that word counts limits you to, right? And you're just like, there's so much more, and there's always more. And the more for something, specifically a chapter is, and what you lose is a lot of the spinning forward. I have a little bit of that at the end, but really chasing out those strings of influence from the BYU football program are really fascinating. So Eugene Roberts, the who starts kind of playing the forbidden football in 1905-ish on BYU's campus, who comes back as the athletic director and coach and like reinstates football. As he goes on, he eventually moves to the University of Southern California, USC, and becomes a coach there. And one of his athletes is the guy named Louis Zamperini. I don't know if y'all, the movie didn't hit nearly as well as the book Unbroken about the POWs in Japan. Louis Zamperini is like the figure point of that, was one of Robert's athletes. And so there's just like this connection that was drawn there. But I think the most, and this is just personally, the most interesting thing that I had to cut was just the larger impact of BYU football on modern football, specifically with Lavelle Edwards. And again, I kind of hint on that, but I really believe that BYU and Lavelle Edwards, their coach that took over in the 70s, created what we see as modern football today. He, of passing the ball constantly. And, I was able to write a little piece about this for a blog elsewhere, but you see through BYU and Lavelle Edwards, this emphasis on the passing game. One of his coaches that he had on his staff early on was Andy Reid, the coach that's now for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, Andy Reid is a Mormon member of the church who played at BYU, coached at BYU under Lavelle Edwards, and like has since gone on to become a very successful Hall of Fame coach in the NFL. One of the other people who kind of was an understudy of Lavelle Edwards was the coach at Mississippi State, Mike Leach. I was dropping his name, who studied the same way. Mike Leach coached at Texas Tech. At Texas Tech, he coached a quarterback named Cliff Kingsbury. The quarterback that Cliff Kingsbury coached was Patrick Mahomes. And now you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid playing together for the Kansas City Chiefs. And so, it's one of the things that it's interesting for me because, the church is one of the leading sources of genealogy. If you look at, doing kind of this historical study in the past, because it has a lot of religious significance for being able to baptize in former members of your family who have passed away. So genealogy is really important for the Mormon church, but it also, if you do like coaching tree is equally important to the study of sports. And you see this kind of coaching tree genealogy going from Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid all the way back to BYU football.
That's fascinating. So I'm just kind of curious, do you have a personal interest as well in athletics, or did that just kind of happen from you doing this research?
No, I love sports. And so I'm a sports fan and a historian, and I'll give this advice to you. I give it to my students that are considering going and doing a graduate school or dissertation or PhD program. And someone given to me in my master's program is that when you're looking for a dissertation project, find something that you can spend 10 to 15 years with and not get tired of it. And you're, as a 22 or 23-year-old, you're just like, that's over half my life. Like, I can't imagine that, and so in doing that, I took that advice seriously, and I found it. So as a fan, I enjoy you know, it's work, it's definitely work, but I enjoy reading this. I enjoy studying the history. It's great. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm glad that y'all enjoyed the chapter. And yeah, I've had a ton of fun. So thank y'all so much.